I select one of these documents, my properties change. So I can search on the metadata properties, those index values that have been assigned to a particular document, or I can do the regular search, which is more like Google, where it's going to search for not only properties, but if it is a text searchable document, then it will search inside of the document. So for example, if I wanted to look for a contract, maybe I'm looking for a specific name of a contract or vendor name, I just use the global search. It's going to give me the information. Now, one of the things you'll notice here is the columns of information that are displayed. The columns of information that are being displayed with the generic search are fixed. However, if we, and I'll do this in a second, if we search for metadata, we actually have the ability to control the columns of information. So let me go back to my home page here. We'll look for an invoice. Now, you can use wildcards. You can substitute question marks for specific letters. So here I'm looking for an invoice. Now, an invoice is a custom document class or object. And we've given that invoice object very specific properties. We have the vendor name, invoice number, invoice amount, invoice date, maybe account number. So these fields I can control, just like what you see on the home page. So this gives you a more meaningful search result when you're looking for very specific pieces of information. The other thing we have is obviously we have our advanced search. This allows you to become very, very granular. When you're going into an advanced search, you have the ability to control just about any element of that particular object that you're looking for. So it allows you to define the types of objects. Maybe I just want to look for a specific type of object. Maybe it's just an invoice that I'm looking for. And within those invoices, we're only looking for PDFs. And I can control the value. So invoices have a dollar value. So I can look at a specific amount or a range. So we can control any of these features. We can look at any of the properties within the document object itself. And then I can have multiple, I can cascade these so I can be very, very restrictive about how I create a search. Once you create one of these searches, you have the ability to save it as a query. So if this is something that you do frequently, you need to find this type of information frequently, you can save that as a query so you don't have to recreate it. The third home page is the My Docushare page. So when you create an account with Docushare, you get your own home page and you get your own personal collection, so you can store information in your collection. This is a really kind of a nice way to be able to access your site because you can have your own favorites, areas where you frequently go to. It shows you what groups you belong to. It shows you what tasks are currently assigned to you. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then it shows you the homepage collections as well. So just another way to present information. So now let's talk a little bit about some of the feature enhancements that we have within Docushare. So one of the things you'll notice is if I go up here, go up to a higher level collection. So you'll notice that the columns of information here are different than what you just saw in the contracts. So one of the new feature enhancements that we have is the ability to control the columns of information that is going to be displayed in a given collection. So if I go into my contracts collection, you can see here I have company name, contract type, governing state, contract status. These are properties that are specific to the contract object. So again, we have the ability to create these custom document objects. So contract has company name, contract type, which is a drop-down window, the contract value, and then we have some other information. This allows us to trigger a workflow. So if we actually want to do something a little creative and we have the content rules manager, we can actually create a workflow. I'll get a little bit more into that in a few minutes. Let me back up a little bit. So the other thing that we have the ability to do is to control the type of information that's being displayed. So you'll notice here I have calendar, collection, document, invoice, PO, and weblog. If you can mute your phones, please, that would be helpful. Can you please mute your phones? So if we go to a top-level collection, you can see I have a larger list. So this is indicative of all of the objects that I have available to me in Docushare. And as I drill down, if I have manage permissions, and who you are in Docushare matters, if I have manage permissions, I can limit that information. So if I go down into my consulting, I can even control it even more. So I only have contract, document, document record. If I wanted to make that even more restrictive, I can go into my properties and change my menu objects. So maybe I don't want a document record any longer. I just want the collection contract and the generic document. That allows me to restrict what I can see as a owner. This cascades to everyone, so anyone who has access to this collection is only going to be able to add these types of documents. One of the biggest features that we have in Docushare is the ability to drag and drop objects into Docushare. So I now have the ability to add documents in bulk just by dragging them into the browser. Now you'll notice there's two windows here. One will add documents as a generic document object. You'll notice that it has a 200 file max that's actually controllable by the administrator in 100 document increments up to 500 documents. Your other option is to drag these, reduce the number of documents I have here, to drag these into the window on the right, which allows you to define what type of object it is. So if these are all contracts, I can designate them as all contracts. And then there may be additional properties that need to be added. So, for example, there may be a required field in here. So I can fill out all of those properties on a document-by-document basis, or I can do that at a later date if there are no required properties. So that allows you to add content in a very, very expedient manner. One of the things you might notice about this particular document is it has a lock on it. So that means it's been checked out by someone. So within Docushare, you have the ability to check documents out. If you check a document out, you can upload new versions. So within the checkout feature, we do have version control. So we can keep a chronological history of the changes to a document up to 999 versions. Probably one of the biggest feature enhancements and changes that we have with this particular version of Docushare is the routing capabilities. Routing is, routing is a feature in Docushare that comes out of the box, so it is part of the base product. One of the feature enhancements that we have is the ability, from an action standpoint, to, if you're going to do a approve or disapprove, you can allow the recipient to make changes, and you can allow them to upload the versions where they've made those changes, and either mandatorily, you can have that so that the new version will be made preferred version and the displayed version. I'll get a little bit more into versioning in a minute. Your other option is to go to review and make changes. So, and this allows you to share those changes with recipients. So if a document is going through its evolution, it's not quite ready for publication, and you have a specific group of people who are responsible for that, you can use a routing slip to send that out to either sequentially those individuals or a group, or to all of those and this is a feature that was with the previous versions, is you can sequentially submit this, or you can send it to everyone all at the same time. Then you just need to define, do you want a single reply for the approval, all reply, or majority reply. Then you can put your subject and your comments. The next thing you want to do is choose the recipient. So you can define that either by users or groups. You can add those. If you're doing this sequentially and you have an order, we certainly have the ability to move this so these people are in the proper order and they receive this in the proper order. And then the last thing you do is to define the escalation process. How much time do you want to give these people to perform on an action? You can declare it by a date, you can specify the number of days, or you can use one of the drop-down options. The other thing is you can be notified of task progress. Now, if you're going to use this, this is something that you would use for a private routing slip. You do have the ability when you create these routing slips to save those and reuse those. They can either be public or private. If they're going to be used publicly or they're going to be used in a content rule, then you probably do not want to be notified. The other thing that's the new feature enhancement is the content rule will look at the people or the group who has been assigned action to make sure that they have permissions. So if you don't have permissions, it will notify you here.
Happy birthday.
The other thing you can do is you can nest these. So I have a contract, maybe it's going through a review by the individuals who are responsible for the creation of the contract. Once that contract has been deemed finalized by the initial group, we could have a second routing slip that would, instead of have review and make changes, be approve or reject. And that could be a different group of people that would be responsible for that. So you can have multiple routing slips nested together. So let's go back in and I'll just show you a routing slip. So this is a different user. In this instance, I've logged in as a different user. And I have a routing slip. So I've enlarged this browser so it's a little bit easier to see. So here's what you can see. This is the original version. This is the latest version. So this has already been reviewed by an individual. So the director reviewed it, made some changes, and has approved it. So I can download this document. I can view it as HTML. If I download it and I make changes, then I probably want to upload it. Now I can download both versions. So if redlining, for example, wasn't turned on and I wasn't able to actually see the changes, I could download both versions. If I want to add a new version, once I've made my changes, I can click this, the up arrow. This allows me to go out and find that particular file. I can make my necessary comments and apply that. Now I'm ready to approve this document, so I can go back to my actual task. And here's my version. So we've got the original version, we've got the version that was uploaded by the director, and now this is the current version. What happens under the covers, we go back to this particular version. This is the one that we just finished routing. We can go in and look at the properties. So there's a couple of things we can do. Anytime you have a document that's being routed, you can go into the properties and look at the status. You can see here The owner was the contract administrator, and this particular routing slip has been approved. So we should have a second version or a third version here. So you can see we've got the initial version, we've got version 2 and version 3. So I can change which version I want to display. I can have the latest version, or I could manually select which version I want displayed. This allows you to have a document that is available for public consumption, but not necessarily all of the versions would be seen publicly. So a subset of individuals, maybe who are working on the latest version, would have access to it, while the publicly accessible version is different. One of the other features that we have is the ability to download and zip. So you can select multiple documents, and it will zip them up and download those into a zip file, and you can store those on your hard drive. Another thing you can do is you can email documents. This leverages the email and print manager, which is another feature that is included in the base product. This allows you to similarly create an email, and you put in the people that you want to receive it, put in the body, the subject, and then you have different options. You can zip it, you can send it as individual attachments, or you can just send the URL links. If you just send the links, then the individual would have to have access to Docushare to be able to gather or access the content. One of the other things that we have, and now I'm starting to get into some of the feature enhancements, is we have Lifecycle Manager. Lifecycle Manager deals with time-based events. So if you have a contract that is nearing expiration and you want to be notified, Lifecycle Manager gives you the ability to have an email sent to you when that contract is either nearing expiration, on its expiration, or past expiration. And what an email would look like would be something like this. So it's going to give you the individual contract that is, in this instance, is a contract that's expiring. It gives you access to the collection that it's located on. You can actually delete it if you wanted to. And you may have multiple documents in this particular email. One thing I didn't touch on is how do you get notified when you're assigned a task? So going back to that routing slip, when you submit a routing slip, whoever the recipients are of that routing slip are going to get an email like this. So they can either go to the My Tasks area, where we saw access that, or you can just click on that URL link in your email, and it'll take you to that routing task. Another feature enhancement that we added with 7.0 is the ability to generate reports. Probably won't be a whole lot in this report because of the collection, but it will do it on a collection basis. So the further upstream I am in collections is going to look in any of those sub-collections, and it'll generate a report. Now it generates a report based on each individual document. So if you have documents and contracts and invoices, in a particular collection, you're going to get a report that would be a collective of all of those objects. Now, within the administrators, you have the ability to define what properties you want to capture on an object-by-object basis. So here's my contract class, and here's the defined properties for that particular object. If I scroll down here a little lower, here's an invoice. Here's the invoice properties that I've defined in the report to be captured. You can see there's no invoices in here. So that's reporting. That gives you the ability to really mine a lot of the information. That used to be a feature of Lifecycle Manager. It's now just part of the base product.
305.416.48.
Some other feature enhancements that we have are within our Content Rules Manager. We have the ability to export documents to another Docushare site. We have the ability now to create a content rule so you can get some kind of a visual here. So content rules allows you to design and automate business processes. So if you're doing something in a paper fashion where it's floating around people's desks, you have the ability to use the Content Rules Manager to automate that process. And it has a lot of flexibility in its capabilities. So the first thing that has to happen with a content rule is, what is the event? What is going to trigger this particular content rule? Something is adding a document that was added. Are you routing documents? Are you changing properties? Is it something to do with lifecycle management? So you select one of these particular fields, and then you can define the specific object that you want to use. You can narrow the document type. So if you want the content rule only to fire based off of a PDF, you would select the PDF object, and then if somebody added a Word doc, for example, that content rule would not fire. And then you can select it just for that particular collection, or you can have it for any of the children collections underneath it. From there, you want to define the property. This is optional. So we can select on specific properties within that particular object. We want to trigger off of a specific company name. We can have it contain or force it to be exactly very specific words. I can look at my date options, create date, expiration date, modify date. Custom document objects can have custom dates. So what is the start date of the contract? What is the expiration date of the contract? And then if there's a Boolean value or a dollar value associated with that, we can also look at that. So we can be very narrow in how we force these rules to trigger. So next is the action, and this is where we have some feature enhancements. So the additions that we have for 7.0, you can see this is quite a long list, is we can update a database. We can update the relative date. We can dynamically create a routing slip. We can export to another Docushare site. We can remove permissions, or we can add permissions. And once you select one of those, depending on which one of these you select, it's going to give you different options. So if I wanted to email content, it's going to give me a different wizard window than if I selected something like I want to route a document and notify an individual. So depending on this particular action is going to determine what is the next task, next action that you're going to see. And that's just a quick overview of content rules. You can see here I've got a process. So this is my contract's content rules. The document comes in and we mark it as a new contract, and we change the summary field to this contract is under review. From there it's routed, it's sent to the director, and if the director approves it, it moves on to legal. If both of those parties mark it, we mark the contract as approved. If for some reason it is rejected, we reject it, we move it to a different collection, and we could have a whole other set of content rules that would trigger to decide how this particular document has to be revised so it can go back through the process. And the last one is a content rule that we use for Lifecycle Manager. So if we go back into my consulting contracts, you can see this is the result of a contract, a content rule being triggered by Lifecycle Manager. So manager sees that this particular document is going to expire within 90 days, content rule triggers as a result of that date nearing expiration, and it changes the summary property from approved to this contract is going to expire. So that's just an example of what you can do with content rules. I'll let you unmute your phone if you're muted. I think I've covered pretty much everything that we wanted to discuss. Is there anything you else wanted me to touch on?
No, I think that's it. That's the basics of the new stuff that's in Docushare 7. We did have a few questions that came in. If you would like, we can start answering those questions. I think we can get through them all.
Okay.
One is a business question. Is there a cost to upgrade to Docushare 7? The answer is if you are currently a Docushare user and you are current on your support, then there is no charge to upgrade to Docushare 7. If you would like any professional services help, any of our partners or the content management group at Xerox are more than happy to help you on that. But there is no license cost to upgrade to Docushare 7.
Yeah.
I have another question. You showed the drag and drop capability of bringing multiple files into a folder or collection in Docushare. Does the drag and drop capability require a client piece of software?
No, it doesn't. It's just a feature of the browser now.
Okay. Also, another question. By the way, the drag and drop feature is one of the coolest features I've seen. It just makes everything so clean. And again, a lot of our organizations do not like client software on their implementations of an application, so this makes it even cleaner. The other question I wanted to get to is what databases are supported by Docushare and what databases will it run on, in other words?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So I'm going to go out to our main information site, which is docushare.xerox.com. You'll notice there's no www. So this is our main information page. I actually brought up the system requirements. So this is a really good page to reference. And you can scroll down and it will give you a list of what databases we support with this particular version. So SQL 2008, 12, 14, Oracle 11.2, and 12c. And if you're a Linux aficionado, Postgres.
And 3 days later, it comes in.
Okay, great. I have another question. Is Docushare 7 available in the cloud?
So, in other words, we're going to see, next week, we're going to see.
You know, the cloud implementation of Docushare is exactly the same as if you install Docushare on your premise. The user interface and the user experience is exactly the same. So it just depends on what your needs are as to which version of Docushare. I mean, whether it's in the cloud or on premise.
Yeah, and just to touch on, because when you start getting into the cloud, security becomes a real concern. So how we stand up a cloud instance for a customer is we create 2 VMs. One VM is for the database exclusively. The second is the VM for Docushare. When we install Docushare, that means the operating system and the Docushare site is exclusive to you and you alone. So many content management systems do what we call multi-tenancy. Box, for example. If you have an account on Box, so does everybody else. Now, you can't see their content, but there is other content that belongs to other individuals. We wanted to have a more restrictive approach from a security standpoint, so we stand up an instance of the operating system and install Docushare on that instance.
I think we've covered it. We covered the drag and drop capability. Does not require client cost to thinking about acquiring Docushare, or if you're an existing Docushare user, it's a great time right now to upgrade to an enterprise package if you're on standard Docushare and you need the enterprise package, to add users or things that you may be thinking of doing but have waited for a while. Ask your rep, your Docushare regional sales manager or your partner sales manager, whoever that may be. And if you have questions about who that may be, just send me an email at tom.haddock, HADDOCK@xerox.com, and I can find the right person for you. But now is a really good time. Now to the end of the year, we're offering some bundle specials. So the other thing I wanted to mention right now is we will be doing these sessions through the end of the year every 2 weeks. So on October 21st, we will have an invoice processing webinar as well using Docushare, and we invite all of you to join us. And if you did not, if you got this in an indirect way, this invitation, please let me know. Send me an email, and I'll make sure you're on our invitation list. That's all I have right now. If Frank, did you have anything else to add? If not, we'll close it out.
I don't think I do. No.
I did have one more question that came in. Is there support for IS 9001?
Sorry, ISO 9001.
Yep.
Sure. Where do you want me to take you, Ryan?
I don't know if I can answer that question. I'd have to know. I'd have to have more information about what you're trying to accomplish.
I have your name, person that submitted that, and I will get back to you on that by email personally. So we'll get back to you as the specific answer to that. We appreciate everyone's time and attendance this afternoon, and again, look for us again. Let's see. Well, another question came in. Yeah, fire away. Can Docushare email to the user during the time of expiration? So, using the Lifecycle Manager capability, can the user set the expiration of the documents? And could Docushare email to the user during the time of expiration?
Well, Lifecycle, that's essentially what Lifecycle Manager would do. So if you define an expiration date, Lifecycle Manager allows you to create what we call a policy that says when this date is reached, and it can be a specific number of days before the expiration date, on the expiration date, or some specific number of days after the expiration date. It can be any of the date features of that particular object. So contract start date, contract expiration date, maybe the create date. So it really depends, but yes, that's what it does, is it sends you an email notification.
Great. It looks like that is all the questions, and for those of you who we didn't get the answer to, I will get back to you personally on that. And again, we thank everyone for their time this afternoon. We wanted to keep this to about 45 minutes, and that's sort of what we've done. We ran over a little, and I apologize again for the hiccup in the communications of the WebEx. And we look forward to seeing you on October 21st. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Hey, I like your shirt.
I like yours. You want a matching bag? No, I'll just go like, you want a matching bag?
Sure, yeah, okay.
Oh, it's in the kitchen.
Sweet.